Mechanics mocked the new apprentice at the shop. What happened next shocked everyone. Amanda Mitchell swallowed the lump in her throat as the muffled laughter of veteran mechanics echoed through Progress Auto Shop's garage. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the wrench, trying to ignore the skeptical glances following her every move. "I bet $10 she won't last 3 days here," Trevor whispered to Jason, pretending to organize tools on the workbench. "A woman tinkering with engines, gotta be a joke." Mr. Reynolds, the shop's boss, crossed his muscular arms and watched the scene with an ironic smile on his weathered face. At 52, he'd run the place for over 2 decades and had never hired a woman as a mechanic. "Well, folks," he called out loudly, grabbing everyone's attention, "our new apprentice is here. Hope you all have the patience to teach her how to change a tire without breaking a nail." Laughter spread through the garage, but Amanda kept her head high. She needed this job more than anything in the world. At home, her grandma Evelyn was growing weaker, and her benefits barely covered the daily medications. "Good morning, everyone," Amanda said firmly, even as her heart raced. "I'm here to learn and work. You can count on me." Jason, a blonde guy in his early 20s, exchanged a meaningful look with Trevor. They knew exactly why she was there, and it wasn't for her skills. "Sure, princess," Trevor replied sarcastically. "First, how about fetching coffee for everyone? That's more your speed." "She wasn't hired to be a waitress," Mr. Reynolds cut in, though his tone carried cruel amusement. "She was hired as a mechanic. So let's see if she can change the oil in that Ford Ranger over there without spilling it all over the floor." Amanda walked to the designated truck, feeling the weight of their stares on her back. Every step seemed to echo in the tense silence that filled the garage. She'd studied basic mechanics on her own, watching online videos and reading manuals borrowed from the library. But theory was nothing like practice. As she positioned herself under the vehicle, she caught whispered conversations she couldn't quite make out. What she didn't know was that her hiring hadn't been a choice. It was an obligation. City Hall had required all registered shops to meet a diversity quota, and her name had been drawn from the available candidates. "Poor thing," Jason muttered to Trevor, watching Amanda struggle with the lug wrench. "No clue what's coming." "Mr. Reynolds' plan is genius," Trevor whispered back. 2 weeks tops, she quits, and we hire Jimmy, his nephew. Everyone wins. The first day felt like an ordeal. Every simple task turned into a test of endurance. When Amanda asked for a specific tool, she was handed the wrong one. When she tried to access the diagnostic computer, her password didn't work. When she needed guidance, the veteran mechanics were always too busy to help. During lunch break, she retreated to the shop's outdoor area, eating the sandwich she'd packed at home. The tears she'd held back all morning finally spilled down her face, mixing with the grease stains on her cheeks. Then she overheard voices from the employee break area. Without meaning to eavesdrop, she caught Mr. Reynolds talking on the phone. "Relax, man. It's just to fill out City Hall's paperwork," he said casually. 2 weeks max, she'll bail, and then we hire Jimmy officially. That girl doesn't stand a chance here." Amanda's heart sank. She had been deceived from the very beginning. That job opening had never been real, just a charade to meet bureaucratic requirements. But instead of feeling discouraged, something inside her ignited, a determination she didn't know she possessed. "We'll see who gives up first," she murmured to herself, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her uniform. The afternoon brought new challenges. Mr. Reynolds assigned her to help Trevor with a clutch replacement, knowing it was one of the toughest tasks for a beginner. Trevor, in turn, went out of his way to complicate every step, giving confusing instructions and changing his mind constantly. "No, no, no," he said with exaggerated impatience. "You're going to break everything like that. Let me do it." "But how am I supposed to learn if I don't practice?" Amanda questioned, trying to stay calm. "Learn?" Jason stepped closer with a nasty grin. "Princess, this isn't school. This is men's work." The tension in the air was palpable. Other mechanics stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation unfold. Amanda felt anger rising in her chest, but she knew she couldn't explode. Any emotional reaction would be used against her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. That night, Amanda came home exhausted and defeated. Grandma Evelyn, her 68-year-old grandmother, was sitting in the living room armchair, knitting a colorful blanket. Her gray hair was tied in a simple bun, and her skilled hands moved the needles deftly despite the arthritis that bothered her. "How was your first day, sweetheart?" the older woman asked gently, noticing her granddaughter's downcast expression. Amanda flopped onto the couch beside her, still wearing her grease-stained uniform. For a moment she considered telling the whole truth about the humiliation she'd endured, but she didn't want to burden Grandma Evelyn with more problems. "It was challenging," she answered carefully. "The other mechanics are really experienced. It'll take some time for me to fit in." Grandma Evelyn stopped knitting and fixed her gaze on Amanda. Those brown eyes, weary but still bright, carried decades of wisdom and life experience. "Amanda, I've raised you since you were tiny. I know when something's bothering you," she said softly but firmly. "What really happened?" Unable to lie to the one person who had always stood by her, Amanda broke down. She told her about the humiliations, the cruel laughter, the discovery that her hiring had just been theater. The words spilled out mixed with tears of frustration and anger. "They want me to quit, Grandma," she concluded, wiping her face with her hands. "They want to see me fail to prove a woman doesn't belong in this job." Grandma Evelyn stayed silent for a few moments, processing everything she'd heard. Her wrinkled hands found Amanda's, offering the comfort only a grandmother could give. "You know, sweetheart, your story reminds me a lot of someone I knew a long time ago," she said, a nostalgic tone in her voice. "He also faced prejudice and doubt when he first started working as a mechanic." "Who was it, Grandma?" "Your father." Amanda froze. Grandma Evelyn rarely spoke about James Mitchell, who had passed when she was still a child. Her memories of him were vague and fragmented, like faded photographs stored in a dusty box. "Dad was a mechanic?" "He was the best mechanic this neighborhood ever saw," Grandma Evelyn replied, pride evident in her voice. "And it wasn't easy for him to earn that respect. People doubted him because he was young, because he was black, because he came from a poor family, but he never gave up." The revelation struck Amanda like lightning. For all these years, she had grown up knowing almost nothing about her father's profession. Her grandmother always changed the subject whenever his name came up, and she had assumed it was too painful to talk about someone they had lost so soon. "Why did you never tell me this before?" Grandma Evelyn sighed deeply, as if carrying a weight she'd held for decades. "Because some memories hurt too much to relive, my dear. Your father didn't just work as a mechanic. He helped build the auto shop where you're working now." Amanda's world seemed to spin. Progress Auto Shop had some connection to her father. How was that possible? Why had Mr. Reynolds never mentioned anything about it? "He helped build it, what do you mean?" "James Mitchell was a founding partner of Progress Auto Shop," Grandma Evelyn revealed, watching the shock spread across her granddaughter's face. "He and Richard were childhood friends. They started the business together over 25 years ago, with the savings they scraped up working at other shops." Amanda felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath her feet. Mr. Reynolds knew her father? They were partners? Why hadn't he shown any recognition when she applied to work there? But what happened? Why did Dad leave the shop? Grandma Evelyn's face hardened, and a shadow of sadness and bitterness crossed her eyes. "He didn't leave, my dear, he was forced out." The second day at the shop started differently for Amanda. She arrived earlier than everyone else, determined to prove herself, but also observing every detail of the place with fresh eyes. Every tool, every piece of equipment, every corner of that shop might hold memories of her father. When Mr. Reynolds arrived, she studied him discreetly, searching for any sign of recognition, any spark of memory connecting him to the man who had been her father's partner. But the shop owner treated her with the same coldness as the day before, as if she were a complete stranger. "Today, you'll help Jason with the inspection on that white Chevy Spark," he announced, pointing to a car in the wash area. "And I hope it doesn't take you 3 hours to do a simple oil change like yesterday." The jab was unnecessary and cruel. She'd finished the task in normal time, but Amanda swallowed the retort rising in her throat. She had bigger questions to answer than arguing with Mr. Reynolds right now. Jason greeted her with the same disdain as the day before, but this time she was ready. She watched his every move carefully, asked specific technical questions, and demonstrated knowledge that surprised him. "How do you know this?" he asked when she correctly explained the engine cooling system. "I studied on my own," she replied simply, not revealing she'd spent the entire night researching online, driven by her grandmother's revelations. During the morning break, Amanda took advantage of Mr. Reynolds stepping out to buy parts and began discreetly exploring the shop. In the room that served as an office, she found some old photographs hanging on the wall. In one, she recognized a much younger Mr. Reynolds standing beside another man with a wide smile. Her heart raced. Even faded and aged, she could make out some of the facial features she'd inherited. That man in the photo was her father. "What are you doing in here?" Trevor's voice behind her made her turn quickly. The veteran mechanic stood in the office doorway with a suspicious look. "Mr. Reynolds asked me to grab an invoice," she lied quickly, trying to sound natural. "The invoice drawer is over there." Trevor pointed to the opposite side of the room. Not near the photos. Amanda left the office with her heart racing, but carrying the confirmation she needed. Her father had indeed worked at that place, and the photograph proved that he and Mr. Reynolds had some kind of close relationship in the past. The rest of the morning passed in a fog of confused thoughts. She went through her tasks mechanically, but her mind was focused on unraveling the mystery unfolding before her. Why did Mr. Reynolds pretend not to know her? What had happened between him and her father that led to his expulsion from the partnership? During lunch, she made a risky decision. Instead of eating in the auto shop's yard, she slipped away discreetly and headed to Mike's Diner, a corner spot that had been frequented by local workers for decades. Old Mike was a man in his mid-60s, sporting a graying mustache and a warm demeanor. When Amanda approached the counter, he greeted her with a friendly smile. "First time here, young lady?" he asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "You must be from Richard's new auto shop." "That's right," she confirmed, ordering a soda. "Do you know the people there well?" "I've known them since they opened," Old Mike replied nostalgically. "Back then they were just two young men full of dreams, Richard and James Mitchell, hard workers like few I've ever seen." Amanda's heart raced as she heard her father's name confirmed by a third person. "James Mitchell," she repeated carefully. "What happened to him? Does he still work there?" Old Mike's expression changed drastically. His smile faded, replaced by a mix of sadness and discomfort. "That's a subject many prefer not to touch, young lady," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "It was an ugly situation. Still makes me sad to think about what happened." "Please tell me," Amanda insisted, sensing she was close to uncovering the truth. "It's important to me." Old Mike studied her for a moment, as if weighing whether he could trust her. "Why would a young girl like you want to know about old things?" Amanda made a decision that would change everything. "Because James Mitchell was my father." The soda Old Mike was pouring overflowed from the glass, spilling all over the counter. His eyes widened in complete shock, and he had to steady himself against the counter to keep his balance. "You're James Mitchell's daughter?" he asked, his voice choked. "Good Lord, you're little Amanda. You know me." "Of course I know you," he exclaimed, coming around the counter to get closer to her. "Your father used to bring you here when you were just a little thing. You loved cheese turnovers and would fiddle with his tools while he talked to me." Tears began streaming down Amanda's face. Finally, someone who could fill the gaps in her memory about her father. "Old Mike, what happened between my father and Mr. Reynolds? Why did they fight?" The older man sighed deeply, as if carrying a weight he'd held for years. "It wasn't just a simple fight, young lady. It was a betrayal that destroyed a decades-long friendship," he began, pouring himself a coffee with trembling hands. "Your father found out Richard was skimming money from the shop. Not a lot, but enough to cause serious trouble. He was stealing? Worse than that. He was overcharging customers and pocketing the difference," Old Mike explained, lowering his voice even further. "Your father tried talking to him privately first, gave him a chance to fix things quietly. But Richard denied everything and started spreading lies about James." Anger flared in Amanda's chest like a fire being stoked. "What kind of lies?" "Said your father was the one stealing. that he had a gambling problem, that he wasn't trustworthy. Each word came out of old Mike's mouth like it pained him. James Mitchell was the most honest man I ever knew, but the lies spread faster than the truth. Then what? Your father lost his temper and said he'd expose everything publicly. But before he could, Richard got ahead of him. He forged some documents, manipulated accounting records, and made it look like James was to blame for everything. Amanda felt nausea rising in her stomach. The injustice of what had happened to her father was overwhelming. The worst part, old Mike continued, was that in the end, Richard ended up with the whole auto shop. Your father lost everything. His business, his reputation, even some friends who believed the lies. And then? Your father tried to start over in other towns, but his reputation had been destroyed here. He died a few years later, still trying to clear his name. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Amanda processed the magnitude of the betrayal that had destroyed her father's life. Mr. Reynolds wasn't just a prejudiced boss. He was the man who had stolen her family's legacy. Sweetheart, old Mike said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, your father spoke of you with so much pride. Said one day you'd be stronger and smarter than him. I think he was right. Amanda returned to the auto shop with renewed determination, but also a strategy. She couldn't just confront Mr. Reynolds with old accusations without proof. She needed to be smarter, more calculated. That afternoon, she discreetly observed the shop's dynamics with analytical eyes. She noticed small details she'd missed before, whispered conversations between Trevor and Mr. Reynolds, reports filled out strangely, customers who seemed unhappy with estimates. Jason, meanwhile, was less hostile than in previous days. She noticed him watching her curiously, especially after she'd shown technical knowledge unexpected for a beginner. "Can I ask you something?" he said during a work break. "Sure." "Where'd you learn so much about engines?" Jason asked with genuine curiosity. "That's not stuff you pick up in a basic course." Amanda weighed her words carefully. Jason could be an ally or an enemy, depending on how she handled this. "My dad was a mechanic," she answered, watching his reaction. "I grew up hearing about cars and engines." "Really? Does he still work in the field?" "No. He passed away when I was a kid." A shadow of sympathy crossed Jason's face. For a moment, the blonde guy who'd been so cruel before showed a more human side. "Sorry, I didn't know," he said sincerely. "What was his name? Maybe the guys here knew him." This was the moment Amanda had been waiting for. James Mitchell. The wrench Jason was holding slipped from his hands, clattering loudly on the concrete floor. His face visibly paled, and he looked around to make sure no one had heard. "James Mitchell," he repeated in a whisper. "You knew my father." I heard of him," Jason answered nervously. "But I didn't know he had a daughter." "And what did you hear?" Jason hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with where the conversation was going. "Amanda, maybe it's better not to dig into that story," he said, lowering his voice. "Some things are better left in the past." "Why?" she insisted. "What's in the past that's so dangerous to remember?" Before Jason could answer, Trevor approached with a suspicious look. "What are you two whispering about over here?" he asked accusingly. "Nothing important," Jason answered quickly. "Just explaining the brake system to Amanda." Trevor didn't seem convinced but didn't push further. Amanda realized she'd hit a nerve, confirming her suspicions were right. The people at the auto shop knew much more about her father than they were willing to admit. The third day brought a different tension in the air. Amanda arrived determined to uncover more about the past, but also to prove her professional skills once and for all. She wouldn't just be James Mitchell's daughter seeking justice, she'd be a respected mechanic on her own merit. Mr. Reynolds assigned her to work alone on servicing an old Honda Civic, a task usually given to a more experienced mechanic. It was clearly another test meant for failure, but Amanda saw it as an opportunity. As she worked, she overheard Trevor and Mr. Reynolds talking quietly near the shop entrance. "She's asking too many questions," Trevor said with concern. "Yesterday she was going through the photos in the office, and Jason mentioned she asked about old mechanics in the area." "Relax," Mr. Reynolds replied dismissively. "It's just newbie curiosity. In a few more days, she'll give up and we'll be rid of the problem. And if she doesn't, she will. I'll make sure of it. The implied threat in Mr. Reynolds's words made Amanda's blood boil, but she kept working as if she hadn't heard a thing. She was starting to realize she was up against more than simple prejudice. There was an active conspiracy to push her out. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. During lunch, she made another risky decision. Instead of leaving the shop, she stayed and waited for everyone to go. When the place was empty, she headed back to the office, this time with a specific goal. She knew it was highly irregular and dangerous, but she needed to find documentation proving the partnership between her father and Mr. Reynolds. If she got concrete evidence, she could confront him with facts instead of just second-hand memories. The file drawer was locked, but Amanda had learned a few unconventional skills during her tough teenage years in the neighborhood. With a screwdriver and a few minutes of patience, she managed to open the simple lock. The documents were organized chronologically, and she went straight to the oldest files. She found contracts, accounting records, supplier correspondence, and then her eyes landed on a folder labeled Dissolved Partnership. Inside were copies of documents confirming everything old Mike had told her: partnership agreements between Richard Reynolds and James Mitchell, records of joint investments, and most importantly, audit reports showing accounting discrepancies. But what truly shocked her was finding exchanges between Mr. Reynolds and an accountant discussing how to adjust the books to pin the irregularities on James Mitchell. It was clear evidence the whole situation had been planned and executed deliberately. Amanda quickly photographed the most important documents with her phone, careful not to leave traces of her search. She was putting her phone away when she heard footsteps approaching the shop. Her heart raced. Someone had come back from lunch early, and she was in a situation she couldn't easily explain. Quickly, she rearranged the papers, closed the drawer, and left the office, heading to the work area as if checking something on the car she was repairing. "Forgot my wallet," Jason said as he walked into the shop, heading to his locker. "Didn't expect to find anyone here." "I was taking the chance to get ahead on the Honda Civic," she replied, trying to keep her voice natural. "I want to finish the tune-up today." Jason studied her carefully for a moment, as if weighing whether he believed her explanation. "Amanda, can I give you some advice?" he finally said. "Of course." "Be careful about the questions you ask around here," Jason said quietly, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "Not everyone likes it when old stories get dug up." "Why are you telling me this?" Jason hesitated, clearly wrestling with something inside. "Because I don't think what's happening to you is fair," he admitted, "and because I knew who your father was." His confession caught her off guard. "You knew my dad?" "I was just a kid, but I remember him," Jason explained. "My uncle worked here back then. He always spoke highly of James Mitchell, said he was the most skilled and honest mechanic he'd ever met." "And what did your uncle say about what happened?" "That it was wrong," Jason answered without hesitation. "That Richard set the whole thing up to take the shop for himself. My uncle was so disgusted he quit right after." Amanda felt like pieces of a complicated puzzle were finally falling into place. "Why didn't you say anything before?" "Because I need this job, and I can't afford to pick a fight with the boss over old history," Jason said bluntly. "But seeing how you're being treated, I couldn't stay quiet." "Does Trevor know anything?" "Trevor knows everything," Jason revealed. "He was here when it all happened. In fact, he helped Richard fake some of the evidence against your dad." The revelation that Trevor had been an active accomplice in her father's downfall added a fresh layer of anger to what Amanda was feeling. This wasn't just prejudice or ignorance. It was a deliberate conspiracy that had cost James Mitchell his career and his dignity. "Jason, do you have any proof of what happened?" "Nothing physical," he answered, "but I know where we might find some." "How?" "My uncle kept some documents from when he worked here. Letters, records. He always said the truth would come out one day." Amanda felt adrenaline rushing through her veins. Finally, there was a real chance to expose the truth and clear her father's name. "Could you take me to see your uncle?" "I can," Jason confirmed, "but it has to be quiet. If Richard finds out I'm helping you, he'll fire me on the spot." When can we go? Tomorrow after work. But Amanda... Jason hesitated. Are you sure you want to do this? Richard isn't just a grumpy boss. He's dangerous when he feels threatened. My father deserves justice, she said with unshakable determination, and I won't stop until he gets it. The afternoon passed in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. Amanda managed to finish the Civic's tune-up with an efficiency that even surprised Trevor, but her mind was fixed on the meeting set for the next day. When she got home, she found Grandma Evelyn in the kitchen, making dinner. The older woman noticed her granddaughter's restlessness right away. Did something happen today? Amanda sat at the kitchen table and told her grandmother everything. The discovery of the documents, the talk with old Mike, the unexpected alliance with Jason. Grandma Evelyn listened in silence, her expression a mix of pride and worry. Are you sure you want to go down this road, sweetheart? She asked when Amanda finished. Stirring up trouble with these people could be dangerous. Grandma, they destroyed our dad. They didn't just take his business, they took his reputation, his dignity, Amanda said, her voice thick with emotion. How can I pretend I don't know and keep working there like nothing happened? Grandma Evelyn remained silent for several minutes, as if carefully weighing her next words. There's something I never told you about your father, she finally said. What? Before he left, he hid some important things, Grandma Evelyn revealed. Documents, records. He knew they might be needed one day to prove the truth. Amanda was stunned. What kind of documents? Copies of everything he managed to gather about Richard Reynolds' wrongdoing. Records of conversations, photos of forged documents, everything he collected before being forced out. And where are these things? Grandma Evelyn struggled to rise from her chair and walk to her bedroom. Amanda followed, watching as her grandmother opened an old wardrobe and moved aside some worn clothes, revealing a shoebox hidden in the back. He asked me to keep this and only give it to you when you were old enough and ready to face the truth, Grandma Evelyn explained, handing the box to her granddaughter. With trembling hands, Amanda opened the box and found dozens of documents, photographs, and handwritten notes by her father. It was a complete archive of the conspiracy that had destroyed their lives. Why did you never show me this before? Because your father didn't want you growing up with hatred in your heart, Grandma Evelyn answered, tears in her eyes. He said if you ever wanted to seek justice, it had to be your own choice, not out of revenge. Amanda spent the entire night examining the documents her father had left behind. It was a meticulous collection of evidence, proving not only James Mitchell's innocence, but also the elaborate scheme Richard Reynolds had created to frame him. There were recordings of conversations. Her father had secretly taped some tense meetings, photos of documents before and after they were altered, and correspondence that clearly showed Reynolds' malicious intentions. Most striking was a detailed diary James had kept, documenting every event, every confrontation, every discovery he'd made about the fraud at the auto shop. Her father's careful handwriting told a story of betrayal far deeper than she'd ever imagined. The fourth day at the auto shop began with Amanda carrying an immense emotional weight, but also an unshakable determination. She now held the tools needed to expose the whole truth, but she knew she had to act with strategic intelligence. Mr. Reynolds greeted her with his usual hostility, assigning her to clean tools and organize parts, tasks clearly meant to humiliate her and waste her technical skills. Today, let's see if you can at least keep the tools organized without breaking anything, he sneered. Mechanics require order, something women usually lack. Trevor and the other mechanics laughed at the cruel joke, but Amanda noticed Jason stayed quiet, avoiding her gaze. She knew he was nervous about their planned meeting that afternoon. Throughout the morning, Amanda performed her assigned tasks flawlessly while discreetly observing the shop's procedures with analytical eyes. Now that she knew what to look for, she spotted signs of fraud she'd missed before. She saw how some estimates were inflated, how certain parts were billed but never installed, how work reports were altered to justify extra costs. It was the same pattern that had destroyed her father, only refined and perfected over the years. During the morning break, an unexpected opportunity arose. A dissatisfied customer arrived at the shop, complaining that his car had the same issue again just a week after an expensive, full service. You charged me $500 to replace a part that wasn't even replaced, the man complained, visibly irritated. I took it to another shop for a second opinion, and they told me the original part is still there. Mr. Reynolds tried to calm the customer with rehearsed excuses, but Amanda could clearly overhear the conversation. It was exactly the kind of fraud her father had uncovered 25 years earlier. There must have been a misunderstanding, Mr. Reynolds said with feigned sincerity. Let me check the work report. Amanda knew he would check the report, and likely alter or invent an explanation to blame the customer or some unforeseen technical issue. It was a pattern of behavior that had repeated for decades. When lunch arrived, Jason approached discreetly. Everything set for this afternoon? He asked quietly. More than set, she replied. I have a few things to show your uncle, too. What kind of things? Documents my father kept before he was forced out of here. Jason's eyes widened. Your father documented what happened. He documented everything. The meeting was scheduled for 6 in the evening at a bakery in the next neighborhood. Jason explained that his uncle, Stanley, had worked as an independent mechanic ever since leaving Progress Auto Shop and had an impressive memory for details. When Amanda arrived at the agreed spot, she found Jason sitting at a table in the back of the bakery, accompanied by a man around 60 with graying hair and hands marked by decades of mechanical work. Amanda, this is my Uncle Stanley. Jason introduced them. Uncle, this is Amanda, James Mitchell's daughter. Stanley stood immediately, tears forming in his eyes. Young lady, you're the spitting image of your father, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The same determination in your eyes, the same strong posture. James would be so proud to see the woman you've become. Jason told me you kept some documents from back then. Amanda got straight to the point. I did, and very carefully, Stanley confirmed, pulling a folder from an old bag. I always knew the truth would have to come out someday. He opened the folder, revealing documents that perfectly complemented the file James had left behind. There were correspondences between former employees, inventory records showing discrepancies, and even photos of Richard forging signatures. Your father was my best friend, Stanley explained, as he sorted the papers. When I saw what Richard was doing to him, I tried to help, but back then Richard's word carried more weight than ours. He'd convinced important people that James was the guilty one. How did he manage that? Money and influence, Stanley answered bitterly. Richard was always good at befriending the right people. He had connections at City Hall, knew folks in the union. When things got ugly, those people turned a blind eye to the evidence and backed his story. Amanda showed Stanley the documents her father had left. The older man examined each paper carefully, confirming their authenticity and filling in gaps in the story. With all this together, he finally said, we have enough proof to expose not just what happened to your father, but what Richard is still doing today. What do you mean by that? He hasn't changed, young lady, Stanley explained. The same scheme he used against your father, he's still pulling on customers. Jason told me about this morning's case, the unhappy customer. It's the exact same pattern from 25 years ago. Jason nodded in agreement. My uncle's right. Since I started working there, I've seen plenty of similar situations. Overpriced parts, services charged but not done. I thought it was just part of the job, but now I understand it's a deliberate scheme. And Trevor? Trevor is Richard's right-hand man in this operation, Stanley revealed. He's always been ambitious and unscrupulous. When your father was pushed out, he took his place in the informal arrangement. Not officially, but in practice, he gets a cut of the profits. The scale of the conspiracy Amanda was facing became clearer by the minute. It wasn't just about clearing her father's name, it was about exposing a fraud scheme that had cheated dozens, maybe hundreds of customers over the years. What do you think we should do? She asked. We need more recent evidence, Stanley answered thoughtfully. The old documents prove what happened to your father, but to really expose Richard, we need to show he's still doing the same thing today. How do we get that evidence? That's where you come in, Jason said. You're inside the shop. You can observe and document current irregularities. If we can prove he's cheating customers now, along with the old evidence, we'll have a solid case. Amanda knew taking on this mission meant putting her safety at risk. If Richard found out she was investigating his activities, the consequences could be severe. "You have to be careful," Stanley warned, as if reading her thoughts. "Richard is smart and dangerous. If he suspects anything, he might try to hurt you in ways we can't even imagine." "My father faced the same risk," Amanda replied with determination, "and he had no choice but to fight alone. Now I have allies and evidence he didn't. I'll do it." The fifth day at the shop began with a palpable tension in the air. Amanda arrived with a clear mission to document current evidence of the fraud scheme, but she knew she had to be extremely careful not to raise suspicions. Mr. Reynolds was especially irritable that morning, complaining about issues with suppliers and customers. Trevor was more watchful than usual, eyeing Amanda with a distrust he couldn't fully hide. "Today you'll help organize the inventory," Mr. Reynolds announced, assigning her a task that would give her access to parts and supplier information. "I want everything catalogued properly. No mistakes." It was exactly the opportunity Amanda needed. Inventory control would reveal discrepancies between parts purchased, parts in stock, and parts reported as used in services. As she worked, she discreetly photographed records showing obvious irregularities, parts listed as used in customer reports but still sitting in inventory, suppliers charging one price but parts being billed to customers at much higher rates. That morning, she witnessed a situation that confirmed her suspicions. A customer came to pick up his car after a complete brake system service. Trevor handed over the keys and the invoice, charging $400 for premium imported brake pads. Amanda knew the pads installed cost less than $100 wholesale and weren't imported at all. Later, checking inventory, she confirmed the customer's original pads were still there. They hadn't even been replaced. It was a complete scam, charging for a service never performed, with parts that didn't even match the actual invoice. At lunch, she met briefly with Jason in a discreet spot to report her findings. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "They're not just overcharging for parts, they're billing for services they don't even do." "Did you get evidence?" "I photographed everything," Amanda confirmed. "Inventory records, customer estimates, supplier invoices, everything that proves the scheme." "Perfect. My uncle wants to meet with you tonight. He said he has an idea to expose everything at once." "What kind of idea?" "He didn't want to talk about it over the phone, said it's better to discuss it in person." The afternoon brought an unexpected development. A younger customer arrived at the auto shop with issues in his car's air conditioning, but unlike the other customers, he asked specific technical questions and showed knowledge about mechanics. Mr. Reynolds and Trevor were visibly uncomfortable with the young man's detailed questions, especially when he asked to see the parts that would be replaced before installation. "That's not necessary," Trevor tried to dissuade him. "Trust our work. We've been doing this for years." "It's not about trust," the customer insisted politely. "I just like to understand what's being done to my car." Amanda watched the interaction with growing interest. It was obvious Mr. Reynolds and Trevor were trying to avoid the customer's technical scrutiny, likely because they planned to pull the same scam on him that they used on less informed customers. "You know what?" the customer finally said. "I'll think more about this estimate. I need to compare prices elsewhere." After he left, Amanda overheard Trevor complaining to Mr. Reynolds. "These know-it-all customers are ruining our scheme," he said angrily. "Back in the day, people trusted mechanics without question." "Relax," Mr. Reynolds replied. "We still have plenty of customers who know nothing about cars, especially elderly ladies and inexperienced young folks." The open admission of the scheme, even if indirect, was further confirmation of what Amanda already knew. But it also revealed something disturbing. They specifically targeted vulnerable people. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The nighttime meeting took place at Stanley's house, a modest home in the working-class neighborhood that carried decades of experience and honesty. The man welcomed Amanda and Jason with fresh coffee and a determination that reminded her of her father. "Young lady, I've thought a lot about our conversation yesterday," Stanley began, "and I've come to the conclusion that exposing what happened in the past isn't enough. We need to catch Richard red-handed, pulling his scams in the present." "How?" I'll pose as a customer, he explained. I'll take my car there, pretend I know nothing about mechanics, and let them run their scam. Only this time, we'll be ready to document everything. Isn't that dangerous? Jason asked, concerned. Of course it's dangerous, Stanley admitted, but it's the only way to get undeniable proof of current fraud, and I can't let them keep taking advantage of innocent people. Amanda stayed silent, processing the proposal. It was a bold plan, but it made strategic sense. What exactly do you plan to do? I'll make up a fake problem with my car, Stanley explained. Something I know is working perfectly, but that a layperson might believe needs fixing. I'll let them give me an inflated estimate, agree to everything, and then document that they charged for unnecessary services. And then? Then we'll have video, audio, and paperwork proving current fraud, which, along with the old evidence, will expose the whole scheme. How will we record without them noticing? Leave that to me, Stanley said with a confident smile. It's not the first time I've had to get creative to catch a liar. The plan was refined as the conversation continued. Stanley would bring his car in the next day, complaining about a strange noise in the engine that didn't actually exist. Amanda would be there to observe and discreetly document, while Jason would attempt an audio recording. Are you sure you want to do this? Amanda asked Stanley. If it goes wrong, we could all be in serious trouble. Sweetheart, I worked with your father for years. I saw the most honest man I ever knew destroyed by lies and greed, Stanley replied with unshakable determination. If there's even a chance to clear his name and stop others from getting hurt, I'm taking that risk. The sixth day began with an anxiety Amanda had never felt before. She knew that in the next few hours, decades of injustice could finally be exposed, but also that one wrong move could destroy all the evidence they'd gathered. Stanley arrived at the shop around 10 in the morning, driving an old but well-kept Chevrolet Nova. Amanda watched discreetly as he approached Mr. Reynolds with the perfect performance of an uninformed, worried customer. "Good morning, boss," he said nervously. "My car's making a strange noise in the engine. A neighbor told me you're the best mechanics around." Mr. Reynolds immediately slipped into the predatory stance Amanda had learned to recognize. His eyes gleamed at the prospect of another easy victim. "Let me take a look," he said with fake concern. "Engine noise can be serious." Amanda observed as Mr. Reynolds and Trevor inspected Stanley's car, inventing problems that didn't exist. She had her phone positioned discreetly to record, while Jason did the same from another angle. "Look at this mess here, Mr. Reynolds said after a few minutes of theatrical inspection. "You've got a water pump issue. The timing belt needs replacing, and the radiator's leaking. Big job." Amanda knew none of this was true. Stanley had checked all those parts before coming, and everything was in perfect condition. "Wow, how much will it cost to fix all that?" Stanley asked, sounding worried. "Won't be cheap," Trevor cut in. "These are imported parts, specialized labor. We're talking about $800 just for parts, not counting labor." "But is it urgent?" Stanley pressed. "Extremely urgent," Mr. Reynolds confirmed with false gravity. "If you keep driving this car, it'll lead to much bigger trouble. Might even leave you stranded on the road." It was the classic scam, creating urgency and fear to force a quick decision and prevent the customer from seeking a second opinion. "All right," Stanley agreed. "Go ahead with the work. When will it be ready?" "By tomorrow afternoon," Mr. Reynolds replied, visibly pleased with how easy the sale had been. "But you'll need to leave the car here and pay 50% up front." Stanley handed over the keys and paid the requested amount, receiving a receipt listing all the fictional problems that would be fixed. It was perfect documented evidence of premeditated fraud. After Stanley left, Amanda overheard Trevor and Mr. Reynolds celebrating. "Another sucker," Trevor said with a laugh. $800 for a job that'll cost 50 at most. "Best part is he'll never even realize we didn't do anything," Mr. Reynolds added. "We'll give the engine a once-over, change the oil that was due anyway, and pretend we fixed all the issues." It was a full confession, caught on audio and video. At lunch, Amanda met with Jason and Stanley to review the evidence they'd gathered. "Perfect," Stanley said after watching the videos. "They incriminated themselves completely. Now we have everything we need." "What now?" Jason asked. "Now we expose everything. Amanda replied with determination. "But in a way that causes maximum impact and ensures they can't escape the consequences." The plan for exposure was carefully crafted. They decided to act the next morning when Stanley would return to pick up his repaired car. It would be the perfect moment to confront Mr. Reynolds with all the gathered evidence. Amanda spent the night organizing every piece of proof: the documents left by her father, Stanley's historical records, photos of the current frauds, and the recordings of the scam pulled on Stanley. It was a complete dossier covering 25 years of criminal activity. Grandma Evelyn watched her prepare everything with a mix of pride and concern. "Are you sure you're ready for this, my dear?" she asked. "Once you confront these people, there's no turning back." "I know, Grandma," Amanda replied. "But Dad tried to do the right thing and was destroyed for it. Now it's my turn to finish what he started." "Your father would be so proud," Grandma Evelyn said with tears in her eyes. "You're braver and more determined than he ever was." The seventh day arrived with an electric energy that everyone in the auto shop could feel, even if they didn't understand its source. Amanda was nervous but determined, knowing the next few hours would define not just her life, but also the long-overdue justice for her father's name. Stanley arrived promptly at 9 in the morning to pick up his car. Amanda and Jason were strategically positioned to document the entire encounter, their phones charged and ready to record. "Good morning," Stanley said to Mr. Reynolds. "I'm here for my Chevrolet Nova. How's the work?" "Perfect," Mr. Reynolds replied with false satisfaction. "We fixed all the issues. New water pump, timing belt replaced, radiator repaired. Your car's as good as new." Stanley briefly inspected the engine, knowing exactly what to look for. "Interesting," he said loudly, "because this new water pump still has the factory mark I discreetly made yesterday, and this new timing belt has the same scratch I made with a pen." The smile vanished from Mr. Reynolds' face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying you did absolutely nothing to my car," Stanley replied firmly. "You charged me $800 for work you never did." "Listen here, old man." Trevor stepped forward with a threatening tone. "What exactly are you accusing us of?" "I'm accusing you of fraud," Stanley shot back unshaken, "and I have proof." It was then that Amanda chose to step forward. She approached the group, holding a folder filled with all the organized documents. "Actually, will we have proof?" she said, drawing everyone's attention. Mr. Reynolds stared at her with growing confusion and irritation. "What are you talking about, girl? Who's we?" "Me, Stanley, and Jason," Amanda answered, gesturing to her allies. "And more importantly, my father James Mitchell also has proof, even after all these years." The shift in Mr. Reynolds' expression was dramatic. The color drained from his face, and he staggered slightly, as if punched in the gut. "James Mitchell?" he repeated hoarsely. "My father. The man you betrayed, framed, and drove out of this auto shop he helped build," Amanda said, opening the folder and displaying the documents. "The man whose name you destroyed with lies and forged paperwork." Trevor tried to intervene. "You don't know what you're talking about. That's all ancient history that was never resolved," Amanda cut him off. "And it's still happening today, as we just proved with Stanley." She began presenting the evidence one by one: the original partnership contracts, the accounting records proving past fraud, the photographs of forged documents, and finally, the recordings of the scam attempted against Stanley. "25 years ago, you destroyed my father with lies," she continued in a steady voice. "Today, you tried to deceive Stanley the same way. The pattern is identical: inventing non-existent problems, inflating prices, charging for services never performed." Mr. Reynolds was visibly panicking as he processed what was happening. This is blackmail," he stammered. "You can't prove anything." "I can prove everything," Amanda replied, pulling out her phone and playing the audio recording of his conversation with Trevor from the day before. "Another sucker. $800 for a job that'll cost $50 at most. He won't even notice we did nothing." His own words echoed through the auto shop, creating an uncomfortable silence. Other employees who had gathered to see what was happening stared in shock and discomfort. "You recorded a private conversation? That's illegal," Trevor protested. Fraud is illegal too, Jason shot back, finally taking an open stand. And you've been doing it for decades. Mr. Reynolds made one last desperate attempt. Even if any of this were true, he said, it's all old news. There's no way to prove anything about what happened 25 years ago. Yes, there is, a familiar voice said from the shop entrance. Everyone turned to see Grandma Evelyn walking into the garage, leaning on a cane but standing tall and determined. She carried a large box in her hands. Grandma? Amanda was stunned. What are you doing here? I brought the rest of the evidence your father left behind, Grandma Evelyn replied, walking straight toward Mr. Reynolds. And I came to look into the eyes of the man who destroyed my family. Mr. Reynolds was visibly shaken by the elderly woman's presence. Evelyn? He recognized. After all these years of injustice, she corrected. Years my granddaughter grew up without knowing the truth about her father. Years you profited from the ruined reputation of an honest man. Grandma Evelyn opened the box and began pulling out more documents, photographs, and even old cassette tapes. James recorded the last conversations you had before he was forced out, she revealed, including the one where you confessed to falsifying the accounting records. The revelation of the old recordings was the final blow. Mr. Reynolds realized he was completely exposed, with no way to deny or escape. We can settle this between us, he tried to negotiate. No one else needs to be involved. I can compensate. I can pay damages. How will you compensate for my father's ruined reputation? Amanda asked with controlled anger. How will you give back the years he lost trying to clear his name? How will you bring back the man who died carrying the mark of dishonesty you put on him? The silence that followed was heavy and tense. Trevor tried to quietly slip away, but Jason blocked his path. You'll have to answer for all of this, Stanley said firmly. Not just for what you did in the past, but for what you're still doing to innocent customers. It was then that another voice joined the conversation. And you'll start answering right now. Everyone turned to see a man in a suit entering the shop, accompanied by two others holding files and documents. Who are you? Mr. Reynolds asked nervously. I'm Arthur Mason, inspector from the Consumer Protection Department. The man introduced himself. We've received a detailed complaint about fraudulent activities at this establishment. Amanda was confused. She hadn't filed any official complaint yet. I filed the complaint last night, Stanley explained. After we confirmed the evidence, I thought it best to involve the authorities immediately. The inspector approached Amanda and Stanley. Are you the ones who filed the report? He asked. We are, Stanley confirmed. And we have extensive evidence of both current and historical fraud. Perfect. We'll need all the evidence for the formal proceedings, the inspector said before turning to Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Richard Reynolds, you are being formally investigated for fraudulent practices against consumers. This auto shop is being fined and shut down until the investigation is concluded. The word shut down echoed through the garage like thunder. It meant Progress Auto Shop was officially closed, at least temporarily. This is absurd, Mr. Reynolds protested. You can't close my business based on baseless accusations. The evidence presented is substantial, the inspector replied calmly, including recorded admissions of fraud, falsified documents, and irregular accounting records. This is not an arbitrary decision. Trevor made one last attempt to flee, but one of the inspector's assistants intercepted him. Trevor Smith, you are also being investigated as an accomplice in the fraudulent activities. The justice Amanda had sought was finally taking shape, but faster and more dramatically than she had imagined. What happens now? Jason asked worriedly, realizing he might lose his job. The investigation will determine the extent of each person's involvement, the inspector explained. Employees who didn't actively participate in the fraud won't be penalized. In fact, they may be called as witnesses. Amanda looked around the auto shop, the place that had caused so much suffering for her and her father. Seeing Mr. Reynolds and Trevor face the consequences of decades of dishonesty brought a sense of justice but also melancholy. There's one thing I need to know, she said to Mr. Reynolds before he was taken in for questioning. Why did you never show even a hint of remorse? How could you look at me all these years, knowing who my father was. Mr. Reynolds stared at her for a moment, his expression a mix of defeat and resentment. Because I believed my own lies, he finally admitted. After repeating the same twisted version for so many years, I almost forgot what the real truth was. Almost? Amanda pressed. I always knew your father was innocent, he confessed in a broken voice, but it was easier to keep lying than to admit what I'd done. With each passing year, it got harder to turn back. Richard's final confession brought an emotional closure Amanda hadn't realized she needed. Seeing the man who had destroyed her father finally admit the truth was both satisfying and heartbreaking. Grandma Evelyn approached Mr. Reynolds with remarkable dignity. Richard, you were like a son to me when you were young, she said firmly but not unkindly. I welcomed you into my home, fed you, treated you like family. What you did to James didn't just destroy him, it destroyed the honest young man you used to be. The elderly woman's words visibly affected Mr. Reynolds, who lowered his head in genuine shame. Evelyn, I'm sorry. I know it means nothing now, but I truly am. Your remorse means something, she replied, but it doesn't undo what was done. James died carrying the weight of false accusations. That can never be fixed. The official investigation continued over the following days. Amanda, Stanley, and Jason were called to testify and submit all the evidence they had gathered. The complete dossier even impressed the seasoned investigators with the extent and quality of the proof. During this time, Amanda discovered things about her father she hadn't known. Other former employees of the auto shop came out of the shadows to testify in James Mitchell's favor, revealing that many people had always known the truth but had been intimidated into silence. One of the most moving discoveries was testimony from an old client of her father's, who had kept a letter James had written explaining his side of the story for decades. It was further proof of the honesty and integrity of the man Amanda had barely known. 3 weeks after the shutdown, Amanda received an unexpected call. It was Arthur Mason, the inspector, with news about the investigation. Amanda, the investigation uncovered far more extensive irregularities than we initially imagined, he informed her. We found evidence of fraud against hundreds of clients over the past 20 years. The total damages amount to nearly $200,000. What does that mean? It means that in addition to criminal penalties, there will be substantial compensation for the victims. That includes a significant settlement for your family for the damage done to your father's reputation. The news brought a sense of justice more complete than Amanda had hoped for. It wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was also about financial restitution for all those who had been wronged. There's one more thing, the inspector continued. The auto shop will be auctioned off to pay the settlements. Would you be interested in bidding? The question took Amanda by surprise. She had never considered the possibility of owning the shop her father had helped build. I wouldn't have the money to... Your family's settlement will be substantial, the inspector explained. And there are financing programs for small business owners. It's just a suggestion, but it could be a symbolic form of justice. James Mitchell's daughter reclaiming what was stolen from him. That night, Amanda had a long talk with Grandma Evelyn about the possibility. What do you think, Grandma? Would Dad have wanted me to buy the shop? My dear, your father always said that place had the potential to be a model of honesty and quality, Grandma Evelyn replied thoughtfully. If you could turn it into that, I think he'd be immensely proud. But I don't have the experience to run a business. You have something more important than experience, her grandmother said with a smile. You have character, and you have allies who can help. The mention of allies made Amanda think of Stanley and Jason, who had been crucial in exposing the truth. Maybe together, they could create something new and positive from what had been destroyed. The next day, she sought out Stanley to discuss the idea. It's an interesting proposal, he said after hearing her out. But running an auto shop isn't easy. You'd need trustworthy people to help. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, Amanda said. Would you consider being my partner? Stanley was visibly moved by the offer. Are you serious? Completely serious. You know the business, you have experience, and most importantly, you have integrity. It would be a way to honor my father's memory by creating the kind of shop he always wanted. What about Jason? Jason would be welcome as the lead mechanic, Amanda confirmed. He proved he was loyal and brave when it mattered. The conversation with Jason happened that same day, and his reaction was even more emotional than Stanley's. "You're offering me a second chance after everything that happened?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "You did the right thing when you spoke up," Amanda replied. "That's worth more than any professional experience." The auction for the auto shop happened a month later, and to many people's surprise, Amanda managed to win the bid for a reasonable price. The combination of the settlement she received and a government loan for small business owners made possible what had seemed impossible just weeks before. The moment she received the keys to the place was deeply symbolic. Amanda stood in the same garage where she had once been humiliated and discriminated against, but now as the rightful owner of the space her father had helped build. "Welcome to James Mitchell Auto Shop," she said to Stanley and Jason, revealing the new sign she'd had made. "Let's make this place everything my father dreamed it could be." The renovation and restructuring of the shop took a few weeks. They invested in new equipment, updated training, and most importantly, established a strict code of ethics that would be followed without exception. The first customer of the new shop was, fittingly, Grandma Evelyn, who brought her old car in for a full inspection. "I want to see if my granddaughter learned her father's trade right," she said proudly as she handed over the keys. The service was carried out flawlessly, with complete transparency and at a fair price. When Grandma Evelyn received the detailed estimate and a full explanation of everything that had been done, her tears confirmed they were on the right path. The following weeks brought a gradual but steady increase in customers. The new shop's reputation for honesty and skill spread mostly through word of mouth from satisfied clients. One of the most touching moments was when old Mike from the diner brought his truck in for maintenance. "Girl, seeing you here as the owner of this shop is one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed," he said with tears in his eyes. "Your father's looking down from above, smiling with pride." 3 months after opening, James Mitchell Auto Shop was already considered a neighborhood staple. But more important to Amanda was knowing they had created a place where people were respected, regardless of gender, age, or background. Jason grew into his role as lead mechanic, showing dedication that went far beyond professional obligation. Stanley brought the experience and wisdom needed to guide both technical and administrative operations. One day, a young man around 20 came in looking for work as an apprentice. Amanda recognized in him the same anxiety and determination she had felt months earlier. "Why do you want to work in auto repair?" she asked during the interview. "Because I need to support my family," he answered honestly. "My father's out of work, and my mother cleans houses. I want to learn a real trade." "Are you prepared to work hard and be treated with respect but also held to high standards?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then welcome to the team," Amanda said, extending her hand. "Here, you'll learn not just about cars, but how to treat people with dignity." The young man, named Ryan, fit in quickly with the team and showed a natural talent for the work. Amanda made sure to give him the learning opportunities she had been denied in her first job. 6 months after the new shop opened, Amanda received an unexpected visitor. It was Inspector Arthur Mason, but this time he was there as a customer. "I brought my car in for a checkup," he said with a smile. "And also to congratulate you on the work you're doing. Your reputation has reached our department for all the right reasons." "What kind of reasons?" "0 customer complaints in 6 months of operation," he revealed. "That's practically unheard of for a new shop. You're setting a new standard for how this type of business should be run. The official recognition of your professional integrity was an important validation of the path you'd chosen." While servicing the inspector's car, Amanda took the opportunity to ask about the fate of Mr. Reynolds and Trevor. "They were convicted of fraud and had to pay substantial fines," the inspector informed her. "Richard lost his license to operate auto shops, and both are banned from working in the field for 5 years. How did they react?" "Trevor still denies any responsibility," the inspector said. "But Richard, he's shown genuine remorse. In fact, he asked if he could send you a letter. Amanda was surprised. What kind of letter? A formal apology. He said he wants to try and make amends, at least symbolically, for the harm he caused to your father's memory. Do you think he's sincere? After decades in this job, I've learned to recognize genuine remorse, the inspector replied. I believe he is. That evening, Amanda discussed the possibility of receiving Richard's letter with Grandma Evelyn. What do you think, Grandma? Is it worth reading what he has to say? My dear, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Grandma Evelyn wisely answered. But sometimes hearing a sincere apology can bring peace to our hearts. So you think I should accept the letter? I think you should follow your heart. You've already proven yourself stronger and wiser than any of us imagined. I trust your decision. A week later, Amanda received Richard's letter through the inspector. It was several pages long, handwritten, detailing not only his remorse, but also specifically acknowledging every wrong he had committed against James Mitchell. The most moving part was where Richard described his memories of friendship with her father. James was my best friend, practically a brother. He helped me when I had nothing, taught me half of what I know about mechanics, and always believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. The betrayal I committed wasn't just a bad business decision, it was the destruction of the most important person in my life out of pure greed and pride. The letter continued with specific apologies to Grandma Evelyn and Amanda, acknowledging the impact his actions had on their family all these years. After reading it, Amanda felt strangely at peace. It wasn't that Richard's actions were forgiven or forgotten, but knowing he finally recognized the gravity of what he'd done brought emotional closure. She decided to respond, not to forgive, but to make clear that the family had found justice and peace through their own efforts. Richard, I received your letter and acknowledge your remorse seems sincere. My father deserved this acknowledgement 25 years ago when he was still alive to see it. Now we've made our own justice by building the kind of honest business he always wanted. Your letter doesn't change the past, but at least the truth has finally come to light. A year after opening James Mitchell Auto Shop, Amanda organized a special celebration. She invited everyone who had supported their journey. Old Mike, former employees who had testified for her father, loyal customers, and officials who ensured justice was served. The most emotional moment came when Amanda unveiled an enlarged photo of James mounted on the shop's main wall. The same photo she'd seen in Richard's office on her first day of work, now displayed with pride and respect. This auto shop exists to honor the memory of an honest man who was wronged, she said to the gathered audience. But more importantly, it exists to prove that integrity and skill always triumph over dishonesty and greed. Stanley, moved, added, James Mitchell always said that quality work was the best advertisement any shop could have. Today, seeing the success we've built on that philosophy, I know he was right. Jason, who had become the most respected mechanic in the area, chimed in. Working here taught me that being a mechanic isn't just about fixing cars. It's about building trust, respecting people, and proving every day that we deserve the responsibility we've been given. The celebration went on late into the night, but the moment that stood out most for Amanda was when an elderly woman approached her at the end of the evening. Young lady, you don't know me, but I knew your father, she said with emotion in her voice. I always knew he was innocent, but I never had the courage to speak up. Seeing you turn all that injustice into something so beautiful, it restores my faith in people. 2 years after opening, James Mitchell Auto Shop had expanded to include a training program for at-risk youth. Amanda had discovered that her mission went beyond simply running a successful business. The program, called New Opportunities, offered free basic mechanic training to young people from low-income families, with guaranteed employment for those who completed the program successfully. Ryan, the young man who had been the first apprentice at the new shop, now coordinated the training program. His transformation from a desperate youth to a skilled professional and inspiring mentor motivated every new participant. Amanda gave me a chance when no one else would, he told each new class. Now it's my responsibility to pass that opportunity forward. The program's success caught the attention of city officials, who began using James Mitchell Auto Shop as a model for other social inclusion initiatives through vocational training. During a graduation ceremony, for one of the program's classes, Amanda was surprised by the presence of Arthur Mason, the inspector who had led the original investigation. "I'm here representing the Consumer Protection Department to officially recognize your work," he announced. James Mitchell Auto Shop has become a regional example of how businesses can combine commercial success with social responsibility. The official recognition was meaningful, but what truly moved Amanda was seeing Grandma Evelyn in the audience, tears of pride in her eyes, watching her granddaughter receive an award for commitment to ethical excellence in business. That night, grandmother and granddaughter talked about how much their lives had changed since that first traumatic day at the shop. "You turned the worst experience our family ever had into the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Grandma Evelyn said. "Your father wouldn't just be proud, he'd be amazed by your strength and wisdom." "I didn't do it alone, Grandma," Amanda replied. "We all did it together. Stanley, Jason, Ryan, you, even old Mike with his advice and support." "That's true. But you were the leader who brought all these people together for a common goal. That's a gift, my dear. Real leadership." 3 years after the shop's transformation, Amanda received an unexpected invitation to speak at a national seminar on women in entrepreneurship and social responsibility. The thought of addressing hundreds of people about her experience made her nervous, but Stanley and Jason encouraged her to accept. "Your story needs to be told," Stanley insisted. "Other people are going through similar injustices and need to know it's possible to fight and win." "Besides," Jason added, "you could inspire other women not to give up on their dreams, even when they face prejudice and discrimination." The talk took place in Chicago for an audience of over 500 people, mostly women entrepreneurs and students. Amanda shared her story from that first humiliating day at the auto shop to the creation of the social training program. The most impactful moment of the presentation was when she showed the photograph of her father and explained how to turn injustice into motivation. "My father didn't live to see his reputation restored, but his memory became the foundation of something far greater than he ever imagined. When we face injustice, we have two choices: to be destroyed by it or to use it as fuel to create something better." The audience's reaction was extraordinary. Hundreds of women connected with different aspects of her story, and many approached her afterward to share their own experiences with discrimination and overcoming adversity. A young engineering student came up with tears in her eyes. "Your speech gave me the courage not to quit my program. I was thinking of switching fields because my professors and classmates make me feel like I don't have what it takes to be an engineer." "You have what it takes to be anything you choose," Amanda replied. "But you'll have to prove it every single day, because some people will only accept our competence when they can no longer deny it." Months after the talk, Amanda began receiving invitations for consulting work with companies that wanted to implement programs similar to the one she had created. It was an opportunity to expand the impact of her work far beyond the auto shop. After discussing it with Stanley and Jason, she decided to take on some consulting projects, but always kept her primary commitment to James Mitchell Auto Shop. "This shop will always be our priority," she made clear to the team. "But if we can help others build honest and inclusive businesses, we have an obligation to do so." The consulting work led Amanda to inspiring stories across the country. Small and mid-sized businesses struggling to maintain integrity in competitive markets, women facing discrimination in traditionally male-dominated fields, young people trying to create opportunities in underserved communities. Each project reinforced her belief that her father's story and her own journey represented something much bigger than just one person's experience. 4 years after transforming the shop, Amanda was approached by a publisher interested in turning her story into a book. The initial proposal made her hesitate. "I don't know if my story is important enough for a book," she confessed to Grandma Evelyn. "Sweetheart, how many people have you helped through the shop, the training program, your talks and consulting?" her grandmother asked. "Directly? Maybe a few hundred? And how many people will those people help in the future because of what they learned from you?" The question made Amanda realize the impact of her work multiplied through every life she had touched. She decided to write the book, but with one condition: all royalties would go toward expanding the New Opportunities program. The writing process was emotionally challenging, reliving the moments of humiliation, uncovering the betrayal against her father, and confronting old injustices brought up feelings she thought she had moved past. But it was also therapeutic, putting the entire experience into perspective, from the initial suffering to the current success, helped her understand the magnitude of the transformation that had taken place, not just in her life, but in the lives of everyone involved. The book, titled The Mechanic's Daughter, A Story of Justice and New Beginnings, was launched in a ceremony at the James Mitchell Auto Shop itself. Hundreds of people attended the event, including many who had been an important part of the journey. Old Mike, now nearly 70 years old, sat in the front row. "Sweetheart, when you were little and came here with your father, I never imagined I'd one day be at your book launch. Life takes some incredible turns." Jason, moved, added, "Working here, I learned that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you are scared. You taught us that." Ryan, who had become one of the most respected mechanics in the area, chimed in. "This place completely changed my life. I came here as a desperate young man and became a professional with purpose. This is more than a job. It's a mission." The most emotional moment of the launch was when Stanley read a passage from the book where Amanda described the crucial role he had played. Stanley wasn't just an experienced mechanic who decided to help me. He was living proof that there are people willing to risk everything for justice, even decades after an injustice was committed. His courage gave me the strength I needed to turn anger into purpose. 5 years after the auto shop's transformation, the James Mitchell Auto Shop had become far more than just a successful business. It was a symbol of how justice, persistence, and integrity could triumph over corruption and prejudice. The New Opportunities program had trained over 200 young mechanics, most of whom found stable jobs or started their own businesses following the ethical principles they learned at the shop. Amanda, now recognized as one of the most influential young entrepreneurs in the region, never lost sight of her humble roots or forgot the suffering that had motivated her entire journey. One quiet afternoon, while overseeing a training session, she was surprised by the arrival of a special visitor. A young woman about 20 years old introduced herself nervously. "My name is Penny. I came here because my story is like yours." Amanda stopped everything to listen. "How so?" "My father was also a mechanic, and he was wronged by his boss too. He lost his job, his reputation, and never recovered. When I read about your story in the book, I thought, maybe you could help me get justice too." The circle was coming full. Amanda realized her mission went far beyond honoring her father's memory or running a successful auto shop. It was about creating a movement of justice and integrity that would endure for generations. "Tell me your whole story," she said to Penny, "and then we'll figure out together how to turn your pain into strength for change." As she listened to the young woman's account, Amanda glanced at the photograph of her father on the wall and felt a deep peace. James Mitchell hadn't lived to see his reputation restored, but his legacy had become something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The James Mitchell Auto Shop wasn't just a place where cars were fixed. It was a place where lives were transformed, where justice was served, and where the memory of an honest man continued to inspire future generations. Jason quietly approached and whispered, "Another person about to discover that injustice can be turned into purpose." "Exactly," Amanda replied with a smile. And so the cycle continues. End of story. Now tell us, what did you think of this story of perseverance and justice? Do you believe Amanda made the right decisions? Share your honest thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If you have a similar experience to share, we'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.